The Obsidian Citadel rose like a jagged scar across the Shadowveil Expanse, its volcanic walls pulsing with ancient sigils, beasts etched in molten stone, snarling with ancestral pride. Mist clung to its spires like a second skin, thick and suffocating. Inside, the air was colder than the stone. Zyra Velith moved through the lower corridors with practiced silence, her hood drawn low, her eyes cast downward. She was a shadow among wolves. The purebloods passed her with disdain, their claws clicking against the obsidian floors, their scents sharp with dominance. She kept her distance, her breath shallow, her rune tattoo burning faintly beneath her sleeve. It reacted to proximity. Too close to power, and it flared. She pressed her palm against her ribs, where the starstone amulet lay hidden, its pulse steady against her skin. It was the only warmth she knew, a relic of her mother, a secret she couldn't afford to lose. Her days were filled with silence and servitude. She scrubbed the ritual chamber floors, polished bone relics, and scraped moss from the sigil walls. No one spoke to her unless it was to command, "Faster, lower your eyes, don't breathe so loud." She obeyed, not out of submission, but survival. Every glance was a risk, every word could be her last. The Citadel did not tolerate difference, and Zyra was different in every way that mattered. She was half human, a hybrid. Her scent masked by old moonweave runes, her spark dormant but restless. At night, she lay on a stone slab beneath a cracked skylight, staring at the moon, wondering what her mother had seen in its glow, wondering if the flicker she felt inside was madness or destiny. The starstone would hum softly then, as if remembering something she couldn't. That morning, everything shifted. A scrawl arrived, sealed with the mark of Valthus Zorath, the Citadel's heiress. Charismatic, predatory. His gaze lingered too long when he passed her in the corridors. She was summoned to the bonding ritual, not as a participant, as a servant. The chamber was lit by arcane torches, the air thick with incense and blood memory. Furs and bones lined the floor. Purebloods gathered in circles, their claws gleaming, their eyes burning with pride. Zyra stood at the edge, invisible. But the moment the ritual began, the moonlight pierced the skylight, striking the center of the chamber. Her tattoo flared, the starstone pulsed, and then her spark ignited. A surge of energy burst from her chest, disrupting the ceremony. Sigils flickered, torches dimmed, the air vibrated with primal force. Her hood fell, her scent changed. Human, hybrid, exposed. The pack turned. Growls echoed. Valthus stepped forward, eyes wide, not with rage, but with fascination. "She's the key," he whispered. Zyra didn't wait. She ran. Through the corridors, past the sigil wall, alarms blared, scouts gave chase. Her spark guided her, wild and untamed. She leapt from the parapet into the mist below, the citadel roaring behind her. She didn't look back.
The ritual chamber of the Obsidian Citadel was unlike any other space within its volcanic walls. It breathed with ancient power, lit by arcane torches that flickered blue and green, casting shifting shadows across ceremonial furs and bones arranged in concentric circles. The air was thick with incense and expectation. Tonight, the pack would bond. Alliances would be sealed in blood and howl, and Zyra Velith, summoned not as kin but as servant, would stand at the edge of it all. She entered quietly, her boots muffled against the stone, her eyes lowered. The chamber pulsed with primal energy. Purebloods gathered in ceremonial garb, cloaks stitched with sigil thread, claws polished, eyes gleaming with pride and hunger. They spoke in low tones, exchanging glances and gestures that Zyra had never been taught to interpret. She moved through them like mist, unnoticed but not unseen. At the center of the chamber stood Volthus Zorath, heir to the Citadel, his presence magnetic and unnerving. His cloak shimmered with obsidian thread, and his gaze swept the room like a blade. When it landed on Zyra, it lingered, not with contempt, with curiosity. She felt it like a brand against her skin. Her rune tattoo flared beneath her sleeve, reacting to his proximity. She gritted her teeth and kept moving, placing ceremonial offerings at the altar, bone dust, moon root, and a vial of blood from the last hunt. The torches dimmed. A low howl echoed through the chamber, signaling the start. Zyra stepped back, folding into the shadows. The purebloods formed a circle, claws extended, heads tilted toward the skylight where the moon hung low and silver. The ritual began, chants rising, bodies shifting, the air vibrating with ancestral resonance. Zyra watched, heart pounding, the starstone at her chest pulsing faintly. She had seen this ritual before, but never this close, never with Volthus leading. His voice was smooth, commanding, laced with something darker. As he spoke the ancient words, Zyra felt her spark stir. It was faint at first, a flicker beneath her ribs, but as the chants grew louder, the energy in the room intensified. Her tattoo burned, her breath caught. She clutched the starstone, trying to suppress the surge. Volthus's eyes found her again. This time, they narrowed. He stepped toward the altar, raising his clawed hand. The sigils on the floor glowed brighter. The moonlight sharpened, and Zyra's spark flared. She gasped, stumbling back. Her sense shifted, human notes bleeding through the rune's mask. A few heads turned, whispers rippled. Volthus tilted his head, intrigued. Zyra's skin prickled with dread. She wasn't supposed to be seen, not like this, not now. The ritual continued, but the tension had changed. Zyra felt exposed, her pulse racing. She backed toward the exit, her fingers trembling. Volthus's voice cut through the chamber again, but this time, it was directed at her. "Stay." She froze. The word wasn't a command. It was a test. Her spark pulsed again, stronger. The starstone glowed beneath her tunic. She turned and fled, heart hammering, the ritual's rhythm echoing behind her like a drumbeat of doom.
The bonding ritual was reaching its crescendo. Chants echoed off the stone, primal and rhythmic, vibrating through the bones of every pure blood gathered. The sigils etched into the floor pulsed in time with the howls, glowing with ancestral fire. Zyra stood at the edge of it all, her body tense, her breath shallow, her starstone burning against her chest. She wasn't supposed to be here, not truly. She was a servant, a shadow, a tolerated anomaly. But something had shifted. The moment the moonlight touched the center of the chamber, her rune tattoo flared violently. The masking spell faltered. Her scent changed. Human. Hybrid. Exposed. It began with a flicker, a pulse beneath her ribs. Then a surge. Her synergy spark awakened, not gently, but violently. A wave of energy burst from her core, rippling through the chamber like a shockwave. The torches dimmed, the sigils stuttered, the chants faltered, and every eye turned toward her. Gasps, growls, confusion. Zyra staggered back, clutching the starstone. Her body trembled, the spark coursing through her veins like wildfire. She could feel it, raw, untamed, ancient. It wasn't just power. It was memory, legacy, a force buried deep within her bloodline, now unleashed. Volthus Zorath stepped forward, his expression unreadable. Fascination flickered in his eyes. "She's the key," he murmured, more to himself than to the pack. His voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Don't let her escape." The chamber erupted. Scouts lunged, claws flashed. Zyra turned and ran, her instincts sharper than ever. The spark guided her, illuminating paths she'd never seen. She tore through the corridors, past snarling sigils and startled guards. Alarms blared, low, guttural tones that signaled a breach. But she was faster. Her body moved with unnatural precision, her feet barely touching the ground. She reached the outer wall. The mist of the expanse swirled below, thick and unforgiving. Behind her, the citadel roared. Howls, shouts, the pounding of pursuit. She didn't hesitate. She leapt. The wind howled around her, the world tilted, and then, impact. She hit the ground hard, rolling through moss and ash, her breath knocked from her lungs. But she was alive. The spark flared again, cushioning her fall, guiding her through the shadows. She ran. Through the mist-laden wilderness, past glowing fungi and whispering trees, her heart pounded, her thoughts raced. What had she done? What had she become? Behind her, the citadel burned with fury. Valthus's scouts would not stop. They would hunt her, cage her, use her. She was no longer a tolerated anomaly. She was a threat, a revelation, a spark that could ignite rebellion or ruin. She didn't look back.
The mist of the Shadowveil Expanse curled like smoke around Zyra's limbs as she stumbled through the underbrush, her breath ragged, her spark flickering beneath her skin. Behind her, the howls of Valthus's scouts echoed faintly, distant but persistent. She had escaped the citadel, but not its reach. The wilderness was no sanctuary. It was a test. She found the watchtower by accident, or fate. A crumbling outpost swallowed by vines and moss, its stone walls cracked and leaning, its sigils long faded. It stood like a forgotten sentinel, half consumed by the expanse. Zyra approached cautiously, her blade drawn, her senses sharp. The starstone pulsed faintly, guiding her toward the entrance. Inside, the air was damp and heavy with mildew. Broken furniture lay scattered across the floor, and the scent of old blood lingered in the corners. She moved through the ruin with care, checking for traps, for signs of life. But there was only silence and decay. She collapsed near a shattered window, the moonlight spilling across her face. Her tattoo had faded to a dull glow, barely masking her hybrid scent. The starstone warmed against her chest, a quiet comfort, but its glow felt louder than ever, like a beacon. She was hunted, and it was calling. She scavenged what she could: rusted blades, scraps of cloth, a half-empty flask of moonroot tonic. Her fingers trembled as she wrapped her wounds, her thoughts racing. The spark was unstable. It had saved her, but it had also exposed her. She didn't understand it, not fully, only that it was tied to her mother, to Moonweave, to something buried deep in this citadel's past. Outside, the mist thickened. Distant howls grew louder. She pressed herself against the wall, heart pounding. The watchtower was no fortress. It was a tomb. And she was its newest ghost. She didn't sleep, not really. Her eyes closed, but her mind stayed alert. Memories flickered, her mother's voice, the scent of ash, the feel of the starstone in her tiny hands. She remembered being told to hide, to never show her spark, to never trust the citadel. But she had trusted silence, and silence had betrayed her. At dawn, the mist thinned. Zyra stood at the tower's edge, watching the fungal groves shimmer in the distance. The expanse was alive, glowing, whispering, dangerous, but it was also free. She took a deep breath, the air sharp in her lungs. She wasn't safe, but she wasn't caged. She would survive. She had to. The starstone pulsed again, brighter this time. A warning or a signal? She turned,
toward the sound of a hoverbike humming in the distance. Someone was coming.
The mist parted like breath from a wounded beast as Zyra stepped beyond the watchtower's crumbling edge. Her spark pulsed faintly beneath her ribs, warning her of movement. A low hum vibrated through the air, mechanical, sleek, foreign. Then she saw it. A hoverbike, black as obsidian, gliding silently across the moss. Its rider dismounted with practiced ease, boots crunching softly against the damp earth. Therion Clive. He was lean, sharp-eyed, wrapped in a cloak stitched with moonweave signals faded by time. His gaze locked onto Zyra instantly, not with suspicion, but recognition. He didn't speak at first. He simply inhaled, nostrils flaring. Her scent betrayed her. Hybrid, starstone, moonweave. His hand hovered near his blade, but didn't draw. "You're not from the Citadel," he said, voice low and edged with curiosity. "But they're hunting you like you are." Zyra didn't answer. Her fingers tightened around the hilt of her rusted blade. The starstone at her chest pulsed again, brighter this time. Therion's eyes flicked to it. He stepped closer, slow and deliberate. "That's stone," he murmured. "It's moonweave. You know what that means?" She hesitated. "It was my mother's." Therion's expression shifted, something between reverence and grief. "Then you're part of this, whether you want to be or not." He circled her, studying her stance, her scars, the way her spark flickered beneath her skin. "You've awakened it. That's why they're chasing you. Valthus won't stop. He needs the spark, needs you." Zyra lowered her blade, but didn't sheath it. "Why do you care?" Therion's jaw clenched. "Because Moonweave was slaughtered. My family, my clan. Valthus called it purification. I call it genocide." The word hung heavy in the mist. Zyra felt it settle in her bones. She had never known the full truth, only fragments, whispers, warnings. But Therion spoke with the weight of someone who had watched it burn. "I've been tracking the Ascendancy protocol, the experiments, the hybrids, the spark. Your stone holds answers, and you might be the last thread Moonweave left behind." Zyra stepped back, uncertain. "You want me." He didn't flinch. "I want to survive, and I want Valthus to fall. If you help me, we both get closer." Silence stretched between them. The expanse rustled softly, glowing fungi pulsing in rhythm with the starstone. Zyra studied Therion's face, scarred, tired, but burning with purpose. He wasn't lying, but he wasn't clean either. "I don't trust you." He nodded. "Good, that means you're still alive." He turned toward the hoverbike, gesturing. "There's a place, a refuge, others like us. Rogues, hybrids, outcasts. They're waiting for a reason to fight. You might be it." Zyra hesitated. Her spark flared again. Not violently, but with a strange warmth. She looked at the bike, then at Therion. The Citadel was behind her, the expanse ahead, and somewhere in between, a chance to understand what she was becoming. She stepped forward.
The expanse breathed around them, damp, glowing, alive with secrets. Zyra and Therion had made camp in a decaying outpost nestled beneath a canopy of bioluminescent vines. The air was thick with mildew and memory. Fungal growths pulsed faintly along the walls, casting eerie shadows across the stone. Zyra sat near the fire, her starstone resting in her palm, its glow steady but subdued. Therion cleaned his blade in silence, his eyes flicking toward the mist beyond the ruins. Something was coming. It arrived without warning, a blur of motion, a growl, then claws against stone. Grimvock's rail burst from the shadows, his scarred face twisted in fury, his blade aimed at Therion's throat. Therion rolled aside, drawing his weapon, but Zyra was faster. Her spark flared, a pulse of energy rippling outward.
Grimvox staggered, his body locking mid-strike, his eyes wide with recognition. The spark didn't just repel him, it reached into him. Zyra stood, her breath sharp. "I don't want to fight." Grimvox snarled, but his stance faltered. "You carry Moonweave's mark." Therion stepped between them. "She's not your enemy." Grimvox's gaze shifted to the Starstone. His expression changed, rage giving way to something older. Pain. He lowered his blade, breathing heavily. "That stone belonged to the Resistance. My family died for it." Zyra's spark pulsed again, brighter this time. The Starstone responded, its glow intensifying. Then the vision came. The air thickened, time bent. Zyra's eyes glazed as the world around her dissolved into light. She saw her mother, Illyra Valeth, standing in a moonweave chamber, her hands pressed against a glowing starstone. Behind her, the citadel burned. Illyra whispered words Zyra couldn't hear, but the emotion was clear. Defiance, sorrow, hope. The spark surged through her, illuminating a map of the expanse, connecting rogue enclaves, hybrid bloodlines, and a single phrase etched in flame: "Unify or perish." Zyra gasped, the vision fading. She dropped to her knees, the starstone dimming in her hand. Therion knelt beside her, eyes wide. "You saw it too?" Grimvox didn't speak. He stared into the fire, his jaw clenched. "My father was part of that resistance. They left us behind, said we were too unstable, too dangerous." Zyra looked at him, her voice soft. "They were trying to protect the spark." Grimvox's laugh was bitter. "They'd protected themselves." Silence settled over the camp. The fire crackled. The mist pressed in. Zyra felt the weight of her legacy pressing against her ribs. The spark wasn't just power. It was history, pain, a promise made and broken. She looked at Grimvox, his scars deep, his eyes hollow. He wasn't just angry. He was abandoned. "I need your help. Not because of Moonweave, but because of what's coming." Grimvox studied her for a long moment, then he nodded once. "I'll stay, but if you lose control again, I won't hesitate." Therion smirked. "That's the spirit." Zyra didn't smile. Her spark pulsed faintly, a reminder of its instability. The vision had shown her a path, but it was fractured, dangerous, and soaked in blood. She had allies now, but trust was fragile, and the Expanse was watching.
Hidden deep within the Shadowveil Expanse, it was a cavern settlement carved from stone and moss, glowing with bioluminescent threads that sneaked across its walls like veins. Makeshift shelters leaned against jagged rock, stitched together from scavenged metal and bone. The air buzzed with tension, rogues sharpening blades, hybrids sparring in circles, whispers of rebellion rising like steam from the ground. Zyra stood at the center of the clearing, her cloak damp with mist, her starstone glowing faintly beneath her collar. Around her, outcasts gathered, scarred, wary, half-feral. They had heard the rumors, the girl from the Citadel, the hybrid with the spark. Some looked at her with awe, others with suspicion, but all of them waited. She raised her hand. The spark responded instantly, flaring beneath her skin, casting a soft pulse across the enclave. A few rogues flinched. One dropped his blade, but Zyra held steady. She stepped into the sparring ring, facing a lean hybrid with jagged tattoos and a broken fang. He lunged. She didn't move. Instead, she let the spark flow outward. Gentle, controlled. The hybrid's movements sharpened. His strikes grew faster, more precise. He paused, stunned. The others murmured. Zyra turned to them. "This is what the Citadel fears. Not just power, synergy." She moved through the ring, touching shoulders, channeling the spark in brief pulses. Speed, coordination, awareness. The outcasts felt it, connected, elevated, something more than their fractured selves. A rogue with a twisted leg found balance. A blind hybrid sensed his opponent's strike before it landed. The enclave shifted. Hope flickered. Therion watched from the shadows, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. He didn't interrupt. Not yet. Grimvox leaned against a pillar, his expression unreadable. The spark had touched him once. He knew its edge. Zyra stepped back, breath steady. "We can fight the Citadel, not as monsters, as one." The clearing erupted in howls and cheers. Blades clashed in celebration. The moss glowed brighter. For a moment, Driftshade felt like something more than a refuge. It felt like a beginning. But beneath the triumph, Zyra felt the tremor. The spark pulsed again, stronger, less stable. She clenched her fist, forcing it down. Not now, not here. Later, as the enclave settled, Zyra sat near the central fire, her thoughts heavy. Therion approached, dropping beside her with a quiet sigh. "You did well," he said. "They believe in you." She didn't look at him. Belief is fragile. So is power. She glanced at the sparring ring, where rogues still practiced, their movements sharper than ever. "I felt it slipping, just for a second." Therion's voice lowered. "The spark isn't just a gift, it's a burden. You carry more than they know." Zyra touched the starstone, its glow soft now. "I carry my mother's fight, their hope, and my fear." Therion didn't respond. He didn't need to. Across the enclave, Grimvox watched them both. His scars itched, his memories stirred. The spark had changed everything, but unity came at a cost, and Driftshade was only beginning to understand it.
The training ground at Driftshade buzzed with energy. Outcasts moved in coordinated bursts, their claws slicing through the mist, their bodies sharper, faster, more precise than ever before. Zyra stood at the center, her spark pulsing in rhythm with their movements. She had become a conduit, amplifying their instincts, syncing their strikes, turning chaos into choreography. For the first time, the enclave felt like an army. But beneath the surface, something trembled. A young hybrid named KL stepped into the ring. Barely 16, his eyes burned with eagerness, his stance wide but unsteady. Zyra hesitated. The spark had touched him before, briefly, harmlessly. But today, it surged. As KL lunged, the spark flared violently. His body convulsed mid-strike. A scream tore from his throat, raw and jagged. He collapsed, twitching, his claws gouging the stone. The others froze. Zyra rushed to him, her hands trembling. The starstone glowed too bright, too hot. Kale's veins shimmered with energy, his eyes wide with terror. Then, stillness. His body went limp. The glow faded. Silence fell. Someone whispered, "He's dead." The word echoed like a curse. Zyra backed away, her breath shallow. The spark retreated into her chest, cold now, heavy. Around her, the outcasts stared, not with awe, but fear. The power that had united them had just claimed one of their own. The clearing felt colder. The moss dimmed. Therion stepped forward, his voice low. "It wasn't your fault." She didn't answer. Her gaze stayed on Kale's body, his face frozen in pain. She had felt the instability. She had ignored it. She had believed in control. But the spark was not a tool. It was a storm. Grimvox approached, his expression grim. "They trusted you." Zyra turned to him, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean for this." He didn't flinch. Intent doesn't bury the dead. The outcasts began to disperse, their movements slower,
their eyes avoiding hers. The unity she had built was cracking. Whispers spread about the spark, about the curse, about the cost of following a hybrid with power no one understood. That night, Zyra sat alone by the fire, the starstone dim in her palm. She replayed the moment again and again. Chaos leap, the surge, the scream. She wanted to lead, to protect, to prove the difference could be strength. But strength without control was just another kind of danger. Therion sat by her side, silent for a long time. Then he spoke. "You're not the first to lose someone to power. You won't be the last." Zyra looked at him, her eyes hollow. "Then what's the point?" He didn't answer right away. "The point is to learn, to carry the weight, to make sure it means something." She nodded slowly, the firelight flickering across her face. She didn't feel like a leader. She felt like a warning. Across the enclave, Kael's body was wrapped in moss and bone cloth, placed beneath the roots of a glowing tree. The outcasts gathered in silence. No chants, no howls, just grief. Zyra didn't join them. She stayed by the fire, her spark quiet, her heart heavier than ever.
The enclave was quiet, too quiet. Zyra stood near the edge of the clearing, her spark subdued, her senses sharp. Something was wrong. The air felt heavier, the moss dimmer, and the howls in the distance were no longer distant. Therion paced near the fire, his blade strapped tight, his eyes scanning the shadows. Grimvox was missing. He hadn't returned from his patrol. No word, no signal, just silence. Then the scouts came. They burst from the mist, lean, fast, claws gleaming. Valthus's elite. Zyra barely had time to react. Her spark flared, casting a protective pulse across the clearing. Rogues scrambled to defend the enclave. Blades clashed, howls erupted, the moss lit up in bursts of panic. And through it all, Grimvox appeared, leading the charge. He didn't attack, he didn't speak, he just stood there, watching the chaos unfold, his face unreadable. Zyra's heart dropped. She pushed through the skirmish, her spark slicing through the mist, reaching him. "You brought them here?" Grimvox didn't deny it. They promised answers, closure. "I needed to know why Moonweave left us to die." Zyra's voice cracked. "So you betrayed us?" He stepped closer, his scars catching the moonlight. "I didn't think they'd kill. I thought they'd just take you." The words felt hollow. Around them, rogues fell. One, a young fighter Zyra had trained, collapsed with a claw wound across his chest. Blood soaked the moss. The spark inside her surged, wild and furious. She reached for Grimvox, her hand glowing. The spark didn't lash out. It reached in. And he broke. Memories flooded him. His family huddled in a burning outpost, his father screaming for help, the Moonweave scouts turning away, his mother's final breath, the silence that followed, the abandonment, the rage. He dropped to his knees. I didn't know what I was doing." Zyra knelt beside him, her spark dimming. "You were hurting, but you made others hurt too." Therion arrived, blood on his blade, breath ragged. "We need to push them back, now." Zyra stood, her spark flaring again. She unleashed a wave of energy across the clearing, sinking the rogues, amplifying their strikes. The tide turned. The scouts retreated, snarling, wounded. Driftshade held. But the damage was done. Another outcast was dead, trust was fractured. Grimvox sat alone near the fire, his eyes hollow, his blade untouched. Zyra approached him slowly. "You can't undo it, but you can choose what comes next." He looked up, tears streaking through ash. "I'll fight, not for redemption, for them." Zyra nodded. Her spark pulsed once, soft, steady.
The Vault of Echoes lay buried beneath the expanse, like a forgotten scar. Its entrance was hidden behind a curtain of crystal vines, pulsing faintly with arcane energy. Zyra stood before it, her breath shallow, her spark quiet but alert. Therion crouched beside her, scanning the terrain with practiced eyes. Grimvox lingered behind, his blade drawn, his silence heavier than usual. The air was thick with wards, sigils etched into stone, glowing in warning. One wrong step could trigger collapse, or worse. They slipped inside, the tunnel narrowing as it descended. The walls shimmered with embedded crystals, each one humming with dormant power. Zyra's starstone pulsed in response, syncing with the vault's rhythm. Her spark stirred, sensing something familiar. Not safe, but known. Therion moved ahead, disabling traps with swift gestures, his fingers dancing across ancient interfaces. Grimvox followed, his eyes scanning for movement, his grip never loosening. They reached the outer terminal, a relic of moonweave tech buried in obsidian. Therion activated it, and holographic records flickered to life. Ghostly images danced across the chamber, diagrams of hybrid anatomy, spark resonance charts, failed experiments. Zyra stepped closer, her heart pounding. The Ascendancy Protocol wasn't theory. It was real, and she was its blueprint. She saw her mother's name, Elira Veleth, listed among the resistors. Notes on her escape, her child, her spark. Zyra's breath caught. The protocol had tracked her since birth. Her existence wasn't an accident. It was a design. Therion's jaw clenched as he read Valthus's signature across the files. He orchestrated this. Moonweave wasn't just attacked, it was dissected. Grimvox growled low. They turned us into weapons. Cyrus' vision blurred. Her spark flared, reacting to the truth. She saw flashes, her mother fleeing through tunnels, the Starstone being sealed, the Citadel's labs glowing with cruel light. The pain surged. She staggered back, breath shallow. Therion caught her, his voice softer now. I needed you for answers. She looked at him, eyes wide. You used me? He didn't deny it. I believed you were the only one who can unlock this. I still do. The vault trembled. The Starstone signal had triggered a response. Sentinels emerged, metal-clad beasts with glowing eyes, claws humming with energy. Grimvox shouted, slashing at the nearest one. Therion fired his pulse blade, but the sentinels kept coming. Zyra's spark flared, blasting a wave of energy that shattered the nearest wall. The tunnel began to collapse. Therion was thrown against the stone, his body convulsing. The spark had touched him, too deeply. He turned feral, eyes wild, teeth bared. Grimvox tried to restrain him, but Therion lashed out, claws raking across Grimvox's chest. Blood spilled. Grimvox fell, memories flashing, his family's screams, the betrayal, the silence. Zyra screamed, forcing the spark to retract. Therion collapsed, panting, his eyes clearing. She dragged them both through the collapsing tunnel, the vault crumbling behind them. They emerged into the mist, bruised, bleeding, broken. The truth had been found, but the cost had only begun.
The vault's central chamber pulsed with quiet menace. Holographic records hovered in the air, flickering with fragments of memory, moonweave sigils, anatomical diagrams, spark resonance charts. The walls shimmered with embedded crystal, casting fractured light across the trio. Zyra stood still, her breath shallow, her spark subdued. Therion moved slowly through the projections, his fingers trailing through data streams like a man searching for ghosts. He stopped at a file marked with Valtus's seal. His jaw tightened. Grimvox leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. The silence stretched. Therion opened the file. Images spilled out, moonweave camps burning, hybrid children restrained, starstones extracted and catalogued. Zyra's mother appeared in one frame, her face bruised, her eyes defiant. Therion's voice was low, almost broken. He ordered it. Valtis, the slaughter, the experiments, the protocol. Zyra stepped closer. You knew? Therion didn't look at her. I suspected. I needed proof. Her voice sharpened. You brought me here for this, not for answers, for leverage. He turned, eyes dark. I brought you here because you're the only one who can survive the truth. The spark inside Zyra flared, not violently, but with betrayal. She backed away, her pulse racing. You used me. Therion stepped forward. I needed you. I still do. Grimvox pushed off the wall. You should have told her. Therion's voice cracked. I watched my sister burn. I held her hand while her spark tore her apart. I swore I'd end this. I didn't care how. Zyra's breath caught. The chamber felt colder. The starstone pulsed faintly, echoing her heartbeat. She saw Therion differently now. Not just a rogue, but a man drowning in vengeance. His charm had masked desperation. His alliance had been a transaction. She turned away, her voice hollow. You don't care about unity. You care about revenge. Therion didn't deny it. Revenge is all I have. The holograms flickered. One showed Zyra's birth record. Classified, sealed, marked as unstable. Her spark had been monitored since infancy. Her mother had fled to protect her. The protocol had waited, watching, preparing. Grimvox stepped beside her. They built you, but they didn't break you. Her eyes burned. Not yet. Therion moved toward the exit. We need to go. The sentinels will return. Zyra didn't follow him. You lied to me. He paused. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you everything. She stared at him, her spark flickering. That's the same thing. The chamber dimmed. The vault's energy shifted. Warning pulses echoed through the walls. Grimvox drew his blade. We're out of time. Zyra looked at Therion one last time. The man who had saved her, guided her, betrayed her. She didn't speak. She didn't need to.
The vault trembled beneath their feet. Warning pulses echoed through the crystalline tunnels, each one sharper than the last. Zyra's spark flickered in her chest, sensing danger before it arrived. Therion limped beside her, still shaken from the feral surge. Grimvox clutched his side, blood seeping through his tunic, his breath shallow. The starstone pulsed erratically, its glow no longer steady. It was broadcasting. Then the sentinels came. They emerged from the walls like shadows made solid, obsidian armor, glowing eyes, claws humming with arcane charge. Valthis' elite, designed to hunt spark bearers. Zyra raised her hand, unleashing a pulse to scatter them, but the spark faltered. The backlash knocked her to the ground. Therion tried to shield her, but he was too slow. Grimvox lunged, blade flashing, but the sentinels overwhelmed them. Chains of light wrapped around Zyra's limbs. Her spark dimmed. The starstone went cold. She was dragged to her knees, her vision blurring. Therion roared, breaking free for a moment, only to be slammed against the wall. Grimvox collapsed beside her, his body twitching, his eyes distant. The sentinels closed in. Then the spark surged. Not from Zyra, but through her. A pulse erupted from her chest, shattering the chains, throwing the sentinels back. The tunnel cracked, crystals exploded, the vault groaned. Zyra stood, her eyes glowing, her voice a whisper. Run. Therion staggered to his feet, his body twitching. The spark had touched him again, too deeply. His eyes turned wild. His claws extended. He snarled, lunging at Grimvox. Zyra screamed, forcing the spark to retract. Therion froze mid-strike, his breath ragged, his eyes clearing. Grimvox lay bleeding, his face twisted in pain. Memories surged through him. His family's screams, the Moonweave scouts turning away, and the silence that followed. He saw Zyra's face through the haze, not as a leader, but as a mirror. Abandoned, burdened, burning. The vault began to collapse. Zyra grabbed Therion's arm, dragging him through the crumbling tunnel. Grimvox stumbled behind, his blade clattering against the stone. The walls caved in, crystal shattering, light flickering. Sentinels howled from the depths, their voices swallowed by falling debris. They burst into the open air, the mist of the expanse rushing to greet them. Zyra collapsed, her spark flickering weakly. Therion dropped beside her, his body twitching, his eyes haunted. Grimvox leaned against a tree, blood staining the moss, his breath shallow. No one spoke. The vault was gone. The truth had been unearthed and nearly buried them. Zyra stared at the starstone, its glow faint, its warmth fading. The protocol was real. Her mother had fought it. Therion had chased it. Grimvox had bled for it. And now it lived inside her. But it was unstable. She looked at her allies, broken, betrayed, barely holding together. The spark had saved them, but it also nearly destroyed them, and the worst was still coming.
The courtyard, once reserved for bloodline ceremonies, now swelled with rogues, hybrids, and rival clan scouts. Makeshift banners fluttered in the wind, stitched with symbols of resistance. The air was thick with tension. Claws unsheathed, eyes narrowed, breaths held. Zyra stepped forward, her cloak heavy with ash, her starstone pulsing against her chest like a second heartbeat. Therion limped beside her, his wounds fresh, his gaze locked on the sigil wall that had erased his lineage. Grimvox stood behind them, silent, his blade resting against his shoulder. The crowd shifted as Zyra raised the starstone high. Its glow cut through the mist, casting fractured light across the courtyard. A hush fell. Even the Citadel guards paused, uncertain. She spoke, her voice steady. The Ascendancy Protocol is real, and we are its victims. A pulse surged from the starstone, activating the holographic records embedded within. Images flickered into the air, Moonweave camps burning, hybrid children restrained, spark extractions catalogued like trophies. Volthus's signature marked every file. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The rival scouts stepped closer, their expressions shifting from suspicion to horror. Zyra continued. They called it purification, but it was control. They feared what we could become, so they broke us before we could rise. Her spark flared, syncing with the crowd's emotions. The outcasts straightened. The rival scouts exchanged glances. Even the Citadel guards hesitated. Volthus appeared at the far end of the courtyard, his cloak billowing, his eyes sharp and unreadable. He didn't speak. His presence was a challenge. Zyra didn't flinch. "We are not mistakes," she said. "We are evolution." The courtyard erupted. Howls rose, blades were drawn. The rebellion had found its voice. Rogues surged forward, empowered by the spark's rhythm. Rival scouts joined the charge, their claws slicing through Citadel ranks. Sigils flared. Alarms blared. The Citadel trembled. Zyra moved through the battle like lightning, her spark sinking fighters, amplifying reflexes, guiding strikes. For a moment, it worked. The rebellion surged. The Citadel faltered. Therion fought beside her, his blade a blur, his movements precise. Grimvox led a flank, his growls rallying the hybrids. The courtyard became a storm of fury and hope. But the spark pulsed again, stronger, faster, less stable. She felt it slip. A rogue near her convulsed mid-strike. Another screamed, his claws turning on his own. The spark had amplified too far. It was no longer guiding, it was overwhelming. She tried to retract it, but the energy surged beyond her control. The battlefield fractured. Allies turned feral. Innocents fell. She screamed, forcing the spark inward, but but the damage was done. The rebellion's peak had become its fracture. The courtyard, once united, now burned with chaos. Volthus watched from the steps, his smile thin and cruel. You gave them power, but not purpose. Zyra dropped to her knees, her breath ragged, her spark dimming. Around her, the cost of unity lay in blood and ash. She had exposed the truth. She had ignited the rebellion, but the spark had turned on her, and the dream she carried now trembled under the weight of its own fire.
The courtyard burned with fury. Claws clashed against stone, howls pierced the mist, and the sigils etched into the citadel walls pulsed like open wounds. Zyra moved through the chaos, her spark blazing, sinking fighters with each breath. The rebellion surged, rogues and hybrids striking in perfect rhythm, rival clans pushing forward with newfound unity. For a moment, it felt like victory, but the spark was changing. It pulsed harder, faster, no longer responding to Zyra's control. She felt it slipping, like a storm building behind her ribs. A rogue near her convulsed mid-strike, his body twisting unnaturally. His eyes turned wild. He lunged at his own kin. Another hybrid screamed, his claws raking across a scout's throat. The spark had amplified too far. It wasn't guiding, it was overwhelming. Zyra tried to retract it, forcing the energy inward, but the spark resisted. It surged again, a wave of raw power rippling across the battlefield. Fighters staggered, some collapsed, others turned feral, their minds consumed by the overload. The rebellion fractured. Unity dissolved into panic. Therion fought beside her, his blade flashing, his movements erratic. The spark touched him again, too deeply. His eyes glazed, his body twitching. He roared, striking wildly, his claws grazing Grimvox's shoulder. Grimvox snarled, shoving him back, blood dripping from the wound. "Control it!" he shouted. Zyra screamed, her voice drowned by the chaos. She dropped to her knees, clutching the starstone, its glow erratic, its warmth fading. Around her, the courtyard became a nightmare, friends turning on each other, enemies watching with grim satisfaction. Volthus stood at the edge, untouched, his smile thin and cruel. "You gave them power, but not purpose," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. Zyra's heart pounded. The spark flared again, threatening to consume her. She saw flashes, Kale's death, Grimvox's betrayal, Therion's confession, every moment of trust, every fracture of hope. The spark had carried all of it, and now it was breaking. She forced herself to stand, her legs trembling. She reached for Therion, her hand glowing. The spark responded, softly this time. It calmed him, just enough. He blinked, his breath slowing. Grimvox joined her, his blade raised, his eyes fierce. Together, they pushed back the feral rogues, guiding the others to safety. But the damage was done. The rebellion had turned on itself. The courtyard, once a symbol of defiance, now lay soaked in blood and ash. The rival clans retreated, their trust shaken. The rogues looked at Zyra not with hope, but with fear. Her spark had given them strength, and then it had taken it away. She stood in the center of it all, the starstone dim in her hand, her spark quiet now. Around her, the cost of power lay in broken bodies and shattered dreams.
The rebellion had fractured, the spark had turned feral, and unity had collapsed into chaos. Zyra stood in the center, her breath ragged, her spark flickering weakly beneath her ribs. Around her, the remnants of the rogue alliance fought desperately to hold the line. The citadel's sigils pulsed with ancestral fury, casting jagged shadows across the stone. Volthis descended the steps like a predator, his cloak trailing smoke, his claws gleaming. His eyes locked onto Zyra with cold precision. She raised her hand, summoning the spark, but it sputtered. unstable, exhausted. He lunged. She braced for impact. Therion moved faster. He threw himself between them, his body colliding with Valthis's claws. The strike tore through his side. Blood sprang across the stone. He fell to his knees, gasping, his blade clattering beside him. Zyra screamed, catching him before he collapsed fully. Valthis stepped back, watching with detached curiosity. Therion's breath was shallow. His eyes met Zyra's, soft despite the pain. "I never wanted to use you. I just didn't know how else to fight." Zyra's hands trembled as she pressed against the wound. "You should have told me. I was afraid of losing you, of losing myself." The spark pulsed between them, gentle now, as if mourning. Therion reached up, brushing her cheek with bloodied fingers. "I loved you from the moment you defied them." Zyra's heart cracked. She leaned closer, her tears falling onto his chest. "You're not allowed to die." He smiled faintly. Too late. His body went still. The courtyard seemed to freeze. The howls faded. The clash of blades dulled. Grimvox stood nearby, his face grim, his blade lowered. The rival scouts watched in silence. Even Valthis paused, his expression unreadable. Zyra rose slowly, her hands stained with Therion's blood, her spark burning with grief. She turned to Valthis, her voice low and sharp. "You took everything." He tilted his head. "I gave you purpose." She unleashed the spark. A wave of energy burst from her chest, not wild, but focused. It struck Valthis, driving him back, his claws scraping against stone. The rival clans surged forward, their unity reignited by sacrifice. Valthis roared, retreating beneath the citadel's archway. The sigils dimmed, the rebellion held, but the victory felt hollow. Zyra knelt beside Therion's body, her spark quiet now, her heart shattered. Grimvox approached, placing a hand on her shoulder. "He saved us." She nodded, unable to speak. The courtyard, once a place of bloodline's pride, now bore the mark of rebellion and loss. The moon hung above, silver and silent, casting light on the fallen. The rogues gathered, heads bowed. The rival scouts turned away, their alliance fragile, their trust shaken. Zyra remained still. Therion's sacrifice had turned the tide, but it had also broken something inside her. The spark, once a symbol of hope, now felt like a curse. She had led them here. She had exposed the truth, and she had watched love die in her arms. The citadel had not fallen. Not yet.
Drift Shade had once pulsed with defiance. Now it pulsed with silence. The Enclave, carved into the roots of the Expanse, lay dim and fractured. The moss had dulled, the fungal glow had faded, and the rogues who had once trained in unison now moved like ghosts, quiet, scattered, uncertain. Therion's death had left a wound no spark could heal. Zyra sat near this central fire, her cloak wrapped tightly around her shoulders, her eyes fixed on the starstone resting in her palm. Its glow was faint, flickering like a dying ember. Her spark hadn't spoken since the battle. It had retreated, buried beneath grief and guilt. Around her, the Enclave murmured, whispers of retreat, of surrender, of blame. Grimvox stood at the edge of the clearing, arms crossed, jaw clenched. He had taken command in Therion's absence, but the rogues didn't rally. They watched Zyra, not with reverence, with doubt. She had led them into chaos, she had promised unity, and the spark had betrayed them. A scout approached, his voice low. "The clans are pulling back. They say the citadel is too strong." Zyra didn't respond. "They say the spark is unstable." She closed her hand around the starstone, her breath sharp. "They're right." Grimvox stepped forward. "Then we need to change the plan." Zyra looked up, her eyes hollow. "There is no plan. Not anymore." He knelt beside her, his voice softer than usual. "Therion believed in you, even when he shouldn't have. That has to mean something." She shook her head. It means he died. The fire crackled, the mist pressed in. The rogues gathered slowly, drawn by the tension. Some carried wounds, others carried questions. All of them carried fear. Zyra stood, her cloak wrapped tightly around her shoulders, her eyes fixed on the starstone resting in her palm. Its glow was faint, flickering like a dying ember. Her spark hadn't spoken since the battle. It had retreated, buried beneath grief and guilt. Around her, the enclave murmured, whispers of retreat, of surrender, of blame. Grimvox stood at the edge of the clearing, arms crossed, jaw clenched. He had taken command in Farion's absence, but the rogues didn't rally. They watched Zyra, not with reverence, with doubt. She had led them into chaos. She had promised unity, and the spark had betrayed them. A scout approached, his voice low. The clans are pulling back. They say the Citadel is too strong. Zyra didn't respond. They say the spark is unstable. She closed her hand around the starstone, her breath sharp. They're right. Grimvox stepped forward. Then we need to change the plan. Zyra looked up, her eyes hollow. There is no plan. Not anymore. He knelt beside her, his voice softer than usual. Farion believed in you, even when he shouldn't have. That has to mean something. She shook her head. It means he died. The fire crackled, the mist pressed in, the rogues gathered slowly, drawn by the tension. Some carried wounds, others carried questions, all of them carried fear. Zyra stood, her voice quiet but clear. I gave you power, and it broke you. No one spoke. I thought the spark could unite us, but it only amplified what was already there. Grimvox stepped beside her. Then we need to decide what we are, not what the spark makes us. She turned to the crowd. I won't lead you into another slaughter. If you want to leave, leave. A few rogues stepped back. One dropped his blade. Another turned toward the tunnel. The fracture had begun. But then a voice rose from the edge. A young hybrid, barely grown, his eyes bright. We didn't follow you because of the spark. We followed you because you fought. Zyra blinked. You stood when the Citadel told you to kneel. You spoke when they told you to stay silent. That's why we're here. The crowd shifted. Heads turned. Doubt wavered. Grimvox nodded. The spark is unstable, but you're not. Zyra looked at the starstone. Its glow had steadied, just slightly. She felt the spark stir, not with power, but with memory. Farion's voice, her mother's warning, Kale's scream, every fracture, every loss, every moment that had shaped her. She stepped forward. Then we fight, not because we're strong, but because we're broken. And we deserve to choose what that means. The rogues howled, not in triumph, in defiance. Driftshade had fractured, but it hadn't fallen.
Driftshade had grown cold. The fires were down to embers, and the rogues who once rallied behind Zyra now kept their distance, speaking in hushed tones, casting glances that carried more fear than respect. The rebellion had cost them too much. Tharion's death, the feral outbreak, the fracture of unity, and at the center of it all stood Zyra, cloaked in silence beneath the moon tree, the starstone dimming in her hand. Each pulse from the stone was slower now, heavier. The spark inside her felt like a thread unraveling, no longer a gift, but a ticking storm. She could feel it. Every breath she took risked another surge, another death. The instability wasn't theoretical anymore. It was terminal, and she knew what that meant. Grimvox approached quietly, his boots crunching against brittle moss. He didn't speak right away. He just stood beside her, watching the faint glow of the starstone flicker like a dying star. "They're afraid of you," he said, finally, voice low. "I'm afraid of me too. Zyra replied, eyes still fixed on the stone. They blame you, for Thario, for the ferals, for everything that's broken. They're not wrong. Grimvox crouched beside her, jaw tight. Is there any way to seal it? She shook her head. It's past that. The spark's degrading. Every time I use it, it pulls harder. It's not just unstable, it's collapsing. He stood abruptly, pacing. Then what? What do we do? Zyra looked up at the moon, pale and indifferent. I end it. You mean... I shatter the starstone. I neutralize the spark. Completely. Grimvox's breath caught. That'll kill you. I know. He turned away, fists clenched, voice sharp. There has to be another way. There isn't. If I wait, it'll surge again. And next time, it won't just be a few. It'll be all of them. She rose slowly, her body aching, the spark inside her pulsing like a warning bell. I won't let that happen. Grimvox faced her, eyes fierce. You're more than the spark. You're the reason they believed. I was. Now I'm the reason they're dying. She stepped past him, walking through the clearing. The robes watched her, some with sorrow, others with fear. No one spoke. She didn't need them to. She reached the center of the enclave, where Tharion had once stood, where Kale had fallen, where her dream had burned. She looked down at the starstone, thought of her mother running through tunnels, hiding her child, whispering of legacy, thought of Tharion, his smile, his pain, his final words, thought of Grimvox, his loyalty, his silence, his grief. She didn't cry. She simply nodded. I'll do it at dawn. Grimvox didn't argue. He couldn't. He just stood there, watching her walk back to the moon tree, her steps slow, her spark steady. The enclave settled into silence. No one knew what to say. No one dared to stop her. Zyra sat beneath the roots, the starstone resting against her chest. Its final pulse was soft, almost gentle. She closed her eyes and waited.
Dawn broke over Driftshade in silence. The mist curled low across the moss, and the fungal glow dimmed as if morning. Outcasts gathered in the clearing, drawn by instinct more than command. No one spoke, no one dared. They knew what was coming. Zyra stood beneath the moon tree, her cloak trailing behind her, the starstone pressed against her chest. Its glow was erratic now, pulsing in jagged rhythms. The spark inside her was no longer a thread. It was a storm, ready to break. Her breath was steady, but her body trembled. She had made her decision, and the moment had arrived. Grimvox stood nearby, his eyes locked on her, fists clenched. He had tried to stop her, had begged her to wait, but she had only offered silence, not coldness, resolve. Now he watched, helpless, as the girl who had once defied the Citadel prepared to give everything. The rogues formed a loose circle, some clutching weapons, others holding each other. The ferals, still twitching from the last surge, crouched at the edges, their eyes wild but slowly clearing. Zyra looked at them. Creatures twisted by power, victims of her spark's chaos, she had amplified them, broken them, and now she would heal them. She stepped into the clearing. The starstone flared, casting light across the enclave. Her voice rose, not loud, but clear. This spark was never meant to last. It was born in pain, fed by fear, and it has taken too much. The wind stirred, the moss shimmered. Grimvox took a step forward, his voice cracking. "You don't have to do this!" Zyra met his eyes. "I do." She raised the starstone high. The spark surged, flooding her veins, her bones, her breath. Light erupted from her chest, not wild, not violent,
but pure. It spread across the clearing, touching every rogue, every hybrid, every feral. The twisted ones convulsed, then stilled. Their eyes cleared, their claws retracted. The spark was healing them, but it was killing her. Her body arched, suspended in the pulse. Cracks formed along the starstone's surface. Her skin glowed, then split. Grimvox rushed forward, catching her as she collapsed. The starstone shattered in his hands, its fragments dissolving into mist. Zyra's breath was shallow. Her eyes fluttered. He knelt beside her, tears streaking his face. "Stay with me," she smiled faintly. "Tell them it mattered." Her spark flickered once more, then faded. Zyra's body went still. The clearing was silent. The rogues bowed their heads. The ferals wept. Grimvox held her close, his grief raw, his howl echoing through the expanse. The moon tree shimmered above them, its roots glowing softly as if mourning. Zyra was gone, but the spark had left something behind. Peace.
The expanse was quiet, not the silence of peace, but the kind that follows something sacred being lost. Driftshade's moss had dulled. The moon tree no longer shimmered. The fungal glow that once pulsed with rebellion now flickered faintly, as if mourning. Zyra's body had been buried beneath the roots. Wrapped in her cloak, the starstone's fragments scattered like ash across the soil. Grimvox stood alone at the edge of the clearing, his blade sheathed, his shoulders heavy. The rogues had gathered once more, not to fight, but to grieve. No speeches were given, no rituals performed, just silence, and the weight of what she had done. The ferals, once twisted by the spark's chaos, now moved with clarity. Their eyes were calm, their claws retracted. Zyra's final pulse had healed them, not just physically, but spiritually. The curse had lifted, but the cost was etched into every face. The citadel had crumbled, not in fire, but in abandonment. Rival clans had withdrawn, their sigils faded, their banners torn. Volthus had vanished into the mist, his legacy shattered by truth and sacrifice. No coalition rose in Zyra's name. No monument was built. Her rebellion had ended not in triumph, but in quiet dissolution. Grimvox walked through the enclave, speaking softly to those who remained. He didn't claim leadership. He didn't offer promises. He simply listened, helped bury the dead, repaired what could be salvaged. The rogues followed him, not out of loyalty, but out of respect. He had stayed. That was enough. At night, he sat beneath the moon tree, staring at the soil where Zyra lay. He spoke to her sometimes, told her what the scouts had seen, what the ferals had remembered, what the clans had whispered. He didn't expect answers, but the silence felt less empty when he filled it with her name. The expanse began to reclaim the ruins. Vines crept over the citadel's walls. Mist swallowed the sigils. The tunnels collapsed, sealing away the vault's horrors. Nature did not mourn. It simply moved on. But the rogues remembered. In their scars, in their silence, in the way they looked at the moon and didn't speak. Zyra's legacy was not carved in stone. It was carried in memory. In the way Grimvox taught the young hybrids to fight with restraint. In the way the ferals learned to howl without rage. In the way no one ever touched the starstone's fragments, still glowing faintly beneath the moss. One night, Grimvox stood at the edge of the expanse, watching the fog roll in. A scout approached, asking if they should rebuild. He thought for a long time before answering. "No, we remember. That's enough." And it was. The rebellion had ended. The spark was gone. But the ache remained. A quiet, persistent ache that whispered of sacrifice, of love, of a dream that demanded everything. Zyra Velas burned bright,